Will you say that there is no quorum and therefore?
Yep, so it's 7:05 and you're now live. So what I'll do with acting chair's approval is I'll call the roll and then we'll have the confirmation that there is no quorum.
Okay.
Okay.
But one of the door just opened, so we'll give it a second.
You're like, who is it?
There's
It's
the
Joe!
quorum. I told you she was
Not too late, am I? Better late than never, darling.
coming. All right, so Chairman, Commissioner Buckingham. Here. Commissioner Fox. Here. Commissioner Friedman.
Yep.
Commissioner Shu. Commissioner Rose Jessup. Commissioner Armstrong.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington. You now have a quorum.
Sorry.
Thank you, Joan.
Yay.
So you're gonna go
Okay,
right in order.
all right. I'm gonna call this meeting to order at 7:06 PM. And we have correspondence on the docket.
And there is no correspondence received.
Okay. Did everyone get a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from March 2nd, 2022 meeting?
So moved.
Second. I never read.
All right, we'll move into old business. Fair housing plan update.
Well, I can update you on the subcommittee's work. A draft plan has been developed and it has been forwarded to David Mertzig, the city attorney, for review to make sure that we haven't done anything or said we will do anything that is out of line with what the city is able to do. And the plan, we hope to have his review done in order to present the plan in draft form to the full commission at the May meeting. But it includes a section on the selection of a fair housing officer, which technically has already been done. It's the community development director. How fair housing information will be made available to city residents. How fair housing complaints will be handled by the fair housing officer. And how the city will affirmatively further fair housing. So the activities that can be included in that. And that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I hope that we can get the draft plan to the Housing Commission with plenty of time for everybody to read it, review it, comment on it, so that we can take action. So we as a subcommittee will herald it along.
Yes.
Next, under old business, we have refugee relocation discussion.
I am on that committee, and there is a meeting of the Housing Subcommittee of the Refugee Resettlement Group, and there is a possibility, if we can locate housing for 10 people, there is a possibility we can expedite the process of accepting families. So I will report the May meeting what's going on. But nothing has really happened since January.
Thank you, Jim. And next, under old business, document review.
The chair intended that to be a review of the emails which have been sent following last month's meeting.
Okay.
So there were the 2 surveys completed by Larry Malone, and then there was a 2018 parking study.
Okay.
I didn't get the 2 surveys by Malone.
Nor did I.
Nor did I.
All right, let's see what happened. Did you?
I don't think so, but it's the kind of thing I might not remember.
Fair enough. Should we move that to the next meeting's agenda?
Yeah,
Okay.
because if I find the email,
Right,
you wouldn't have had time to review it to discuss, so.
Should we do a motion to move the document review under old business to the next meeting?
You don't need to.
You don't need to vote?
No,
Okay.
and it was sent on March 4th at 9:53 in the morning,
Okay.
so I can resend it, that's not a problem.
Thank you. Apologies.
That's okay.
Okay, new business. Anyone have any new business?
Well, I can talk about what we started doing with mapping of vacant land.
Wonderful.
Joan sent me 2 computer printouts of vacant land in the city, one all vacant land and one land over 1 acre. I haven't been able to go through that yet because it's going to be really time consuming because you have to look up one property at a time through its tax map number. So, not only don't I have the time, I don't think I have the patience to do all that.
I was gonna offer that I would be happy to help with that. If you wanted to split it up, we can do that.
Well, that would be great, but I think that we might be able to ask the county to just make a map of it
Awesome. Yeah, you're right. No
and
problem
keep
there.
that as a
Yeah.
separate map, or
Okay.
2 separate maps.
Yeah.
So I've worked for the city since 1978, I think.
Thank you.
And so I have a lot of experience with properties in the city.
Yeah.
And so I drove all over the city and I looked at land that I thought had potential for things to change. And not just land, but buildings, including like St. Mary's School, that's just sits vacant. And so I've mapped this in colors in terms of what kinds of, in colors that represent categories of problems that each property would confront. And some of them are not for sale. And so, and I don't mean that the property will confront problems, but that the city would confront the problem with getting development on it. So, for example, we have buildings that don't have much use going on because they're flat one-story buildings in an area that should be much higher density,
Right.
like the Salvation Army store or the Green Earth store.
Yeah.
Those are great locations for high-rise senior citizen housing.
Yes.
But unless somebody starts the conversation with property owners, that's never going to happen. I doubt that a developer will come here and look at the Salvation Army or the Green Earth and say, oh, I'm willing to do everything I have to do to get that developed. Maybe if there really was, I think it's obvious that there's a need for senior citizen housing in the downtown area. I think the Brazil building proved it, and I think St. James and Plains prove it.
In Parkland, what used to be the Christian Science Church, that got converted into apartments.
Yeah.
And I think there's a large number, I don't know the composition of the tenants, but I imagine there are a lot of seniors.
Yeah, I think gauging what the real demand is hard to do. And no developer's going to believe us, so there needs to be data to present.
Right.
So does everybody know Kurt Schulte?
Yep.
Who's sitting in the audience? So Kurt is the executive director of the Oneonta Housing Authority. Do you mind me asking of the applicants and waiting lists that you have for the housing authority, do you know approximately what the proportion of elderly are, or are you not keeping track of that?
We do kind of know, I mean, For Nader Towers, I would say we're about 85% elderly, 15% disabled, but the percentages are skewing toward disabled. We see more applications from disabled. And disabled, I guess I gotta back up and define, HUD defines elderly as 62 and older, so like I'm elderly, and disabled.
Right. We have to find another word.
Yeah, and disabled is any disability as defined by HUD, which is extremely broad. So in Nader, and Academy Arms is the same category, although different income levels. The same definition for residency there, except different income levels. So I would have to check to see what our percentages there are on applications, but assuming that it's roughly similar. So we have a wide range of people living there. We have some very young individuals and then obviously very old individuals, which sometimes creates issues. I mean, sometimes the mix isn't good because people that are 30 want to do things that people that are 85 don't, and they want to do them at different times of the day. But, you know, that's kind of out of our control because that's something that was designated by HUD years and years ago, that elderly was also going to be disabled. So I don't know if I answered the question. I kind of went sideways, I think. But.
In terms of your senior population, is the there is income eligibility?
Yes.
Is it higher than someone younger with a disability?
No, it's the same income, yeah.
So I think
and
you're
Nader
talking
Towers
about
income,
different populations.
Nader Towers is low income. Academy Arms is very low income, so it's a different income, guidelines.
Mm. So the Brazils building, that's a different population.
Right, that's market rate.
Right.
But I think when we're talking older or more mature, there's the income gamut from low to high. And I think what Peter is saying is that we need to accommodate that age range as well as all income strata.
The income level for Nader, and HUD establishes what the income level is going to be, and it changes every year. And it's based on the number of people, that are in the household. Nader Towers is either efficiency 0 bedroom or 1 bedroom. So we've either got 1 person or 2 people. I mean, that's the maximum that we can have there. I mean, we have some people that are living on $800 a month, Social Security, and others who can earn, and I'd have to again go check, but up to upper 30s, I think, 35, 36,000 a year is still eligible. I mean, we have some people that are working. Still not tremendous numbers, but some. So it's extremely wide gap there. I mean, there are people living in Nader that could easily live at market rate, housing, but they still qualify.
And your waiting list is how long?
It's dropped significantly since the housing up at what is it, Monroe? Housing Visions. I can't think what the address is. It's 9 months to a year, I would say, which sounds like a really long time, but it's not, because our process, the application process, I mean, first you submit an application. Many times the application isn't complete because we require landlord references, other references. We do a background check. If there are fingerprints on file, the applicant has to get fingerprinted. They're sent to the FBI. We get the FBI reports, and we can look at the criminal history of the applicant and then make decisions. So, like I say, a year seems like a really long time, but there's a lot of things that happen over that time span. And many times the applications don't come in complete, so they have to be sent back out and more information gathered, so.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate you being here.
Sure.
Anything else we need to discuss?
So what are the next steps for our looking at properties that could be developed?
We need an action plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of additional business, correct? Action steps.
I think the next step would be to figure out which parcels would be the easiest to get on the market. And then to categorize the rest of them in terms of how hard they are to get on the market and what the difficulties are. And as a long-term plan, I think we really need to look at selling off city-owned public lands and school system-owned lands that are not really being used. But that's a real long-term thing, but if we don't start, we'll never finish.
Right.
I think with the land that is on the market, we should identify what needs to be looked at. For example, like East Center Street, I know there's a problem with the water pressure, but there's a lot of land up there for sale.
Mm-hmm. But isn't it hillside zone also?
I mean, it's zoned multiple family housing.
Right, but it's hillside overlay, right? Hillside zoning overlay?
Yeah, but I don't think that's, I don't really, well, I don't know if it still is. It used to be.
I haven't looked for a while.
Yeah, that did make it a little more difficult to develop, but I think it was still developable.
How many people, I just roughly, and I don't know if you can say, Joe, but do you have a lot of people that are looking for land to develop in the city
Mm-hmm.
that want to
Yeah.
build?
Mhm.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good.
And I think that the community development department is working with some consultants to identify developers that are interested.
That's wonderful.
So I think there's a lot of buzz, but no
No.
specific plans.
There seems to be a kind of a difficult to read system in terms of getting the city more developable. And I think the key thing is to at least double the amount of code enforcement that we have on building maintenance. And I think without that, our neighborhoods are not going to be in demand for families. And we really need families. Families is the future of a community.
And how do we attract them here?
Yeah.
And that's broadband internet, that's, the landlords that currently exist that have let their properties disintegrate, not fixing those up. I don't want to live next door to a frat house myself that's run down. There's a lot of things to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the main entrances to the city are pretty shabby.
They are.
And so if a parent is bringing their student, their child to look at a school, if the city was in better shape, they might say, gee, maybe we should live here. There's a lot of cultural activities because of the colleges.
Yeah.
But then they look at the neighborhoods and they're pretty crummy.
I think what young families look for are good schools,
Correct.
quality of life, so, you know, outdoor activities, culture. And I think I have an opportunity as a realtor to see the city from people's viewpoint that are coming from outside the area. And sometimes we have blinders. I think Oneonta is a pretty attractive place. And
I agree.
there's a housing shortage.
Agreed.
So, you know, I agree that our gateways should be improved, but that's not gonna make a decision to, I'm gonna move here or not. It's a first impression that's not the greatest, but we have a lot to offer. And I think if we start from the perspective of this is what we have and we want to make it better, it's a better place to start.
The developments like the Newman, I forget what it's called now. What's it?
Which one are you
I don't
Hillside
want
Commons?
Brigham, Bugby Road.
Hillside Commons.
Hillside Commons. Developments like that, or the Silver Creek development. Do those result in some housing in the city being vacated and available?
Generally not. I mean, I think you were on staff when Hillside Commons was built.
Yeah.
And the landlords, the student housing landlords were up in arms that they were gonna
Yeah.
be bankrupted, and that wasn't the case at all. And from my perspective, from the market perspective, a lot of people were saying to me, geez, you know, Hillside Commons, why did they build that for students? Why, you know, I'd love to live there. You know, it has a gym, it has central air, and, you know, upgraded everything, and I don't want to take care of my yard anymore. And so I do think that it didn't adversely impact the student or the property owners, landlords of student housing. And I think there's a market for, as you were saying, more of that for, I guess, I wouldn't call them elderly, but people where kids have moved out of the household, they want downsizing households.
All right.
Empty nesters.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, when the Silver Creek development opened up, we immediately lost 3 or 4 residents because they did have, I think, 40 units for senior citizen. And, you know, of course, it was brand new as compared to a building that was 40 years old and, I mean, it's gone, you know, as soon as they opened up. We actually had one of them move back, didn't like being up there, felt they were too isolated, but.
I live on Maple Street. I've lived there for a long time. And I've noticed over the last couple of years that there are fewer students in some of the apartments, or not students at all, but renting to people who are working people. So I don't know why that is. These are apartments that were once rented to strictly students. I've just attributed it to there being fewer students living in the center city. But again, I have no data.
And or folks, you know, who aren't ready to buy a house yet, that want to rent versus buy.
But landlords weren't renting to those people before
Right.
because
Okay.
they can get more rent by
Right.
renting to students.
Yeah, good point.
Department College building there, their dorm unit and you know, making living on campus mandatory have an effect on opening up units in the city?
I,
You know what I think it might be, Peter? With COVID for the past 2 years, student population was definitely diminished.
drop in enrollments.
And so in order to keep units occupied, landlords rented to working people.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I have this belief without any basis, it's a faith-based belief, that when any housing that gets built has a trickle-down effect and a trickle-up effect in terms of providing vacant housing, because people move out and into the new project. So that vacant housing is likely to be in residential neighborhoods, whether it's senior housing or subsidized middle-income, low-income housing. And I don't know if you can determine who's going to benefit, if it's going to trickle up or trickle down or not at all, or people are just going to come from outside the area and move into these places. Do you have any sense of what happens with?
I think it depends on the market and the demographics at the school and the economy in general. And Jen, you can speak to this also. But over time, I've seen when the population, the student population has decreased because of the general population curve, more student housing units came on the market for sale. Landlords weren't making enough money, and that was in the early 90s. And a lot of those houses got purchased and rehabbed with OFO money for single-family residences.
So owner occupants.
Yes, yes. And the program that OFO offered was for rehab and I think gap financing also. And it was very successful. I think there were probably 15, maybe 20 units total that were converted from student housing to single-family residential housing. But I don't think that there's one strict rule on trickle up or trickle down. If the population trends, if there's no employment and people are moving out of the area, you're going to have a higher vacancy rate.
Yeah.
And
The reason I ask the question is
Okay.
because it seems to me that as a city, we can't really do very much to promote development. Dick Miller did, and Gary Herzig did, and Kim Muller did, with the hotel and the apartments and that kind of stuff. But those were one single project. And that the things that we can do is get more land on the market and make the zoning allow construction. Not just the rules, but the review process, which has always been horrible for anybody who wants to build anything. Like putting up with all the landlords, giving them a hard time upon what you were talking about before, hillside comments.
I think that the city can do significant things. And there are tools not only that the city can use, like CDBG funds for rehab or for gap financing, helping people acquire properties. But there's a entity that the city created called a local development corporation that can acquire, sell, work with private developers, public-private entity. So that's a tool that the city has that they haven't used. Otsego now has the ability to do tax abatement, as well as issue bonds, industrial development bonds. That's more for employment, but there might be ways to work with financing, and there's a lot of this, now it's a one-time funding, but there's a lot of funding from the federal government right now that the county has acquired and the city has acquired that could be used for housing. And we should be exploring those opportunities in a sooner rather than later exercise. Because right now, I didn't get to read the whole article in the paper, but the council was looking at spending the Recovery Act funds for a path in Neola Park. And I don't know how much funding we've received and how much is available, but there's no reason why it couldn't be used in a capacity to market property, help people that are looking to purchase, like, there's a gap between what they can afford and what they qualify for. So there's more opportunity than we realize.
So how do you get the leadership to do that, rather than spend money on that trail along the roads?
And a bandstand.
And a bandstand, yeah.
I think we need to identify specific projects, come up with proposals. Right now, I think it would be very difficult to offer gap financing because there's not enough inventory for people to be purchasing.
Right.
But I can, and again, it's not based on facts and figures, but the affordability index, so what people are making and what they qualify for and what the prices of housing are right now, there is a huge gap. There's just not the inventory for those people to purchase.
Come up with a list of good ideas to propose to the council.
Yeah. Specific locations.
Right.
And
Well, Market Street is a development corridor according to the comprehensive plan, correct? So, and I've often thought that Salvation Army building is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, probably over the tax.
So maybe we should form a subcommittee or meet have another meeting before next month and identify priority projects.
Could not agree more. We need action items. And let's make proposals and.
Take them
everything
to
we
the
can.
mayor,
Exactly,
the city council.
yeah. And then speaking of federal funding, one thing, I work for, my day job is, I work for Otsego 2000. We're a nonprofit based in Cooperstown, but we cover Otsego County. One thing we're doing right now is surveying Oneonta and the historic districts for federal money to help, its tax credits to help restore historical homes.
In the
So,
district, only in
yes.
the district, though.
Within, correct. So we're trying to expand. Currently, our historic district is just Walnut Street. That's it.
Yeah.
And we wonder why Walnut Street is so nice. So now we hired Jessie Ravage. She's a surveyor, and we're trying to expand the historic district in Oneonta to provide the tax credits to those homeowners so they can use it to get a new roof, do their siding. And so that will be exciting for Oneonta.
It's my impression that the Walnut Street properties are pretty well maintained
Indeed,
already.
yeah.
So I don't know if there's an affordability issue.
Good point.
I mean, if we have money available and we have options for how to use it, I'd rather see something that we need that's not happening already.
Yes. So I agree, action items and a meeting between meetings.
Yeah, I will try and finish that map, and then maybe we can use that as a basis for selecting
start.
where we want to go.
Yeah, I think that would be very exciting. And another opportunity that I see, and I don't have the time to do the mapping, but the small vacant parcels in the city, that's an opportunity for infill housing. So we're not gonna have a big developer come and do 20 units, but putting a house, and I think, what was the group that did the, on Clinton Street?
Oh, the Silver Creek
Yeah,
project?
yeah.
I don't remember the name.
They did some infill housing. They built a couple of
right.
houses.
Mhm.
And they're
It was housing
really
vision,
nice.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
housing vision.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
maybe we should, I mean, that could be a really easy start if there are city-acquired vacant parcels where, and we have a developer who's done it before.
So when you first were speaking, I first thought about this. I first thought you were talking about these little slivers, but you're talking about lots that are already really buildable. Because the building burned down on them or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah. Along with looking at the developable parcels too.
Well, we need somebody who will go and find somebody who will build on those lots. And that's always been our problem.
Well, that's what you suggested, the Housing Visions group, entity, whatever they are, inviting them to look at these parcels
Right.
to see if they're interested,
You
right?
want to do that?
Right. Of course. Why not?
Well, that's always been our problem, is that we haven't had what we used to call an ombudsman who would make that connection on behalf of the city.
And I think that there is, that the community development department is working with a consultant, the Delaware Engineering, and they're identifying developers for the Market Street corridor.
That's great. That's already to build. Just need somebody to want to build.
Mhm.
And you can build 10-story apartment houses. Another issue is Fox Hospital. And I don't know at what point we want to get into that, but they were having a lot of problems finding housing for nurses during the harshest time of COVID. And there's property around there that could be developable as homes that could be redevelopable as multifamily housing. I have no idea if Fox Hospital is interested in partnering to do something like that.
Well, now they're Bassett,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it does take, in my view of things, that would be a wonderful type of partnership.
Mhm.
Same way Springbrook is developing the Ford block, and Hartwood College is involved in the Deet Street development, Fox Hospital. I mean, all of the major employers that are saying to us, there's a shortage of housing.
Mhm.
Corning Incorporated could be involved
Mhm.
with, so it's forming partnerships.
Exactly.
Has Bassett already done something like that in Cooperstown with housing?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't think so. When we lived in Vermont, my husband grew up here, it's a long story, but anyways, and we basically lived here or been back and forth for 20 years. And, but we, in Bennington, Vermont, Southern Vermont Medical Center, did a similar thing where they bought up dilapidated properties, rundown properties from the city at a very low price, and built a house offered it to the employees first. It was part of revitalizing the city of Bennington, Vermont, and it went really extremely well. But it was, the medical center was the main employer in the town. And so now we have Bassett, who is one of our biggest employers, and I think it's worth having a conversation with them, for sure.
In Bennington, did the medical facility participate in the
Yes.
housing construction?
Yes, they actually purchased and they hired a developer, they had the funds and the means to do so, as does Bassett. So it's definitely worth a conversation.
Yeah.
So that could be part of our action items. And who's doing what and talking to who, and we can check some of these things off the list. So do we want to set up a proposed meeting for in between? Do we want to select a date for that? Or do we want to wait till the May meeting and then have everyone involved in a decision on that?
Well, of course, I would prefer to wait till the May meeting, only because I'm not sure how much time we're gonna have to get this map done, and I think it would really be a good tool to have to start with, so
Okay.
that we're actually doing the broadest scope possible in our first review. But I'd be glad to meet earlier too.
My only concern is if we're looking to develop a proposal for Recovery Act fund, there's a deadline on those funds, so
Right,
sooner rather than later is better.
okay. What should we do, group?
Well, I'd be glad to meet in a couple of weeks before the next meeting.
I would too. I have to look at the calendar, forgive me.
That's what I was. Do we want to open this up to the other members?
Absolutely.
Well, some of them, but not all of them. A few we should tell about this.
Well, see, then we can assign things to them because they're not here.
That would never work.
Wink, wink. Okay. Do we want to look at the week of the 18th?
Good.
And we can keep it on a Wednesday.
There are 2 meetings in the city on a Wednesday,
Okay.
that particular week.
About what other day that week works for?
Why does that matter?
It depends on how many people you're gonna have at your meeting. If you have 4 or more, it has to be a noticed meeting.
I'm so glad you're here. We'll be doing all kinds of illegal things.
Thank you.
So do we have to declare it a public meeting and advertise it and all that?
If you plan on having 4 or more people in attendance from your board, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a quorum, which means that the commission could commit business, conduct business.
Well, I mean, we could leave it at 3. If, scheduling it becomes an issue and where to hold it or whatever.
Well, I have a conference room at my office that we can use.
Very good. So do we want to keep it Wednesday, or do we want to say Thursday or Friday? What's better? I can be flexible.
So we're talking Wednesday the 20th?
Mm-hmm.
All those days are good.
Okay.
What time is good for you, Jen?
This time is good, or we can meet earlier again, I can flex my schedule, so. I defer to all of you.
You can defer to two others. You
Right.
can't defer to them all.
Okay.
What's your office, Joe?
31 Main Street. It's the Social Security Administration. So should we say maybe 4 p.m.?
Good. Good.
That's very good.
So we don't want to exclude you.
I'll be waiting with bated breath for the update.
Okay, so it's Peter, me, and Jen.
Yes. Very good. All right. Is there any other business we would like to discuss? Anything from the audience?
You want to go first? You want- Okay, Joan invited me here. My name's Marty Becker. I live at 4 Hazel Street. I've lived in Center City, Oneonta since 1985. I rented on High Street, I rented on Brook Street, I owned on Elm Street, and now I own on Hazel Street. I've lived with students, college students, since 1985, in one way or the other. And had my ups and downs, but always had good relationships, always tried to get along with them, always accepted that there was student housing in the city. But I've seen changes over the past almost 40 years now that I'm not particularly happy with. And how this started was I asked Joan a few questions because we're friends, and I had some housing questions. And so she invited me to the meeting, and when I told some of my friends that I was going to this meeting, I heard all sorts of unhappiness. So I feel like I'm speaking for a lot of people in Center City, Oneonta. What started my conversation with Joan is that a house across the street from us was sold to a person from downstate who said he bought it for his daughter, who's a college student. There seemed to be 4 students there. You know, I can't prove it, but the point is, lots of cars, lots of illegal parking, lots of stuff. Not too much noise, but the whole neighborhood's, you know, the sidewalk not getting shoveled, and I've called code enforcement about that. But what I came to Joan about was just to ask, how does this work? You know, how many people are, I thought what I'd read in the paper that you could only have 3 unrelated people, that 4 then became student housing. This is not considered student housing. This is considered a private house. It's not that, but what I found out when I started telling some of my friends I was coming to this meeting is this is going on all over Spruce Street, specifically between Clinton and Brook, that the street, I used to live on Brook Street, that stretch of Spruce has fallen apart since I left. People are really upset. Another friend, her daughter is employed at Bassett Healthcare, can't get an apartment in town because of the prices that have gone up in student housing. I rented an apartment on Brook Street in the 90s for, you're not going to believe this, $250. Yeah, half a house. I know, because they weren't, you know, trying to make a lot of money. But lots of things have happened, and like I said, I've had my ups and downs. I remember bringing my 2-year-old daughter, who's now 34, up to campus when we were having trouble with, you know, we were trying to improve the city campus relationships and talking at the different dorms, and this is what we need. And I always was talking to my neighbors, you know, I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning, I go to work at 6:30, could you keep it down? But we, you know, all got along. I know we can't have student housing ghettos. I mean, I get that. But I and many other residents are questioning why there isn't some sort of control about how many houses turn into student houses. And now with a a new mayor who has, come out and said very plainly many times that he wants to have 1,000 new residents. A lot of us are questioning where they're going to go, because a lot of people aren't going to want to go into Center City. And I listened to you talking, it's been very interesting listening to you. I'm a registered nurse. I don't know anything about, housing and stuff, but I know a lot about rules. And I feel like there could be more rules, and there haven't been. And like I said, it's been a long time now. And last Saturday night, I felt like it was deja vu all over again, because they finally had their party, and it spilled out onto the street. And again, I really don't want to sound like, oh, I moved up to Hazel Street and I'm up on the hill with all these nice families and we don't want the students around. I mean, there's plenty of students around the corner, both directions, and they're all over. I get that, and that's not the point. But the point is that things are not, I mean, the mail deliverer even said to me, she said, I can tell you there's more than 3 people living in that house. And, not taking care of the yard, all sorts of things. I understand it's always just a small portion. What I'm questioning is, what is the city doing about the housing? It doesn't seem like there's a real big code enforcement office. I don't know how much, they can do. None of us are spying on our neighbors. I mean, we've all got lives. But it's just become a very, very frustrating situation. And Peter, I hear what you're saying, and Joan is right. The past 2 years, things did quiet down because a lot of the students weren't in the city.
Some.
Right, a lot, yeah, a lot were still here. And again, I really am uncomfortable just, it being a them and us situation. That's, they're all entitled to be here. But I'm questioning, why are we talking about bringing all these people in and having to improve properties? There's plenty of properties around that have become unaffordable because of these high rents. And it's just become very, very frustrating. And I don't know what can be done. But Joan suggested I come here and tell you. And like I said, I feel like I'm speaking for a lot of people. Another person on Ford Ave, same thing. She said, oh, this has been going on in our neighborhood for years. We were talking up on Hazel Street, and then I talked to my friend on Spruce Street, and it's just, it's an unhappy situation. And I don't know if anything can be said, but I don't know. I gotta tell you, the mailwoman actually said to me, she says, I feel like, she said, I don't live in the city, but it seems like you do more for the students than you do more for some of the people who live here. It's just gotten to be, these people, like I said they were buying this house for their daughter. Now there's at least 4 people over there.
I think many, many people in the Center City feel the way you do.
Yes.
I do, and I have for a long time. And I think people are worn out
Yes.
talking about it.
Yes.
I'm really glad that you're here to talk about it.
Thank you. Well, I am worn out because this has been going on, like I said, for almost 40 years, and I'm an elderly person.
And the older you get, the less likely you are to make a fuss about these things.
Exactly.
But what you're doing is not just preserving your lifestyle, but you're preserving the lifestyle of a whole neighborhood. Now, if I don't think 3 to 4 is that big a deal in terms of crowding, but I do have a theory that when you go from 3 to 4 or 3 to 5, you increase the fire safety risks.
Exactly. Well, I know that. And again, as a nurse, I know that. And it's also, what's going to happen when this daughter graduates? Now that this person from downstate who has, doesn't live here, bought this house.
It is illegal for them to have 4 kids.
Right, I know that. But
But they get around it.
well, this is what, Joan and I had a long conversation about this.
What did you say?
They get around it.
Not legally.
I have heard so many people say, well, they're cousins.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
related.
yeah.
I had my DNA tested. My whole family tree's on
I know,
Right, but that's just it,
but
what,
it's not the three unrelated is not being enforced, and it's almost an unenforceable.
right,
It used to be easy to enforce it because the state university would send us, the code enforcement office, a printout of where every kid lived. Off campus,
Really?
And then they had to stop doing it for privacy.
Privacy.
issues, When those issues became more important than they were equality.
Right, exactly.
somewhere along the line. I think the other side of the coin with 3 versus 4 is that if a lot of people do that, for every 3 extra kids in 3 apartments, that's 1 apartment that's not being occupied.
Yeah.
So you wind up with a higher vacancy rate, I think, with that kind of thing happening.
and it's, it's again, 3 or 4, I'm sure there's at least 4 over there, and yes, I am somewhat concerned about their safety. I'm more concerned about the fact that they're constantly parking on the wrong side of the street, and their car's going the wrong way, and on, and they don't shovel, they haven't been shoveling their sidewalk, and they just, but the whole thing is, there's one house. Is this going to we all joked because a house in the middle of Hazel Street just went up for sale. And the joke was, well, it won't turn into student housing because it only has 1 bathroom. Seriously, that was otherwise, there's another house going up for sale this summer and everybody's worried now.
I think another thing that happened because of COVID is, and I don't know if it's still happening, but the police department started to be a little more lax with student activities.
Oh, so that's not just me thinking that.
No,
I've called the police.
Yeah, I've called
about
the police
parking,
lots
yeah.
of times with an illegal fraternity down the street from me, and the police go in and give them a warning, and then I call them again an hour later because the same thing's happening, and the police go in, and I don't know if anything happens. But it continues to be a fraternity house, even though it's not a fraternity house. And the house that you're talking about, if there was a whole lot of kids out in the street and they were all girls,
No, they weren't all girls.
because if they were all girls, it's clearly a sorority party.
Right, no, they were, yeah.
Which is illegal to
Right.
use a house as a sorority house because of the fire safety issues with having crowds.
Yeah, it was
Do
typical.
you have the owner's phone number?
No, I don't. I went over there once, and this is interesting. I went over there once to introduce myself. It's not like it used to be because last fall it was still kind of COVID, and I've got 2 young grandchildren, so I'm real careful. But I've tried, and nobody answers the door. I called Mark Davies about something because we were having trouble with their parking. He went, nobody answered the door. So it's kind of hard to be friendly.
Yeah, well,
Because that was something I thought of. Usually, several neighbors, we have each other's phone numbers in case one of us goes away or something, we watch each other's houses and stuff.
I think it starts with conversations.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely. So if you need help tracing, like, their address and phone number, next time contact me, I'll help you.
Yeah.
And we'll,
But can the city do anything about how many
they can. but-
houses are allowed to be sold to people to use for students?
No, they can't have a law that says that you can only have so many single-family houses with 3 students in it, within a radius or something, because if 3 students are a family, defined as a family, 4 students are defined as a rooming house. So that's the only way to enforce that issue. But every house on your street could be converted to 3 students.
Who defines that? Who
Yeah.
sets that definition?
Why is that okay?
4 is a rooming house and 3 is a family.
The city did.
So the
many
city
years
can
ago.
change that.
They can't make it less.
Why not?
It's case law. Where
Precedent?
they were thrown out. Those laws were thrown out.
Hmm.
At one time, the city's law said you can't have more than 5.
But why can't the city say we can only have 300 student houses in the whole city? Is that, I'm just grabbing a number.
I don't think they can, because I think it's unconstitutional because a family has been defined as 3 students or a family related by blood marriage or adoption. And I may be, my understanding is maybe obsolete.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, though, but it's-
Because I don't pay attention to it much. I've given up because I'm older.
I have a problem, yeah, I just,
But I do think it's the city's role to do something about it, if it's a behavior issue. It's not, I have not found it profitable to talk to student houses where the kids are being a pain in the ass.
yeah,
Especially boys. Girls are a little easier to talk to, but boys just get.
I used to think that, but now I found that, yeah, I know, no, I know, I mean, I've been doing this for years, this is not new.
Yeah.
So now that this is brought up to us as the Housing Commission, how do we help this resident?
I think the way to do it, I think the way to do it is to direct the council as one of our recommendations to double the size of the code enforcement office. They need more staff,
Yeah, I agree,
and they need more laws
yes.
that have automatic fees, which they have had a lot lately. They've made a lot of new laws to make automatic fees so that they don't have to take anybody to court, because they can't afford to take anybody to court. And the fees can be pretty high, but making those laws takes a lot of time, and the city really should hire an attorney to do that
Yeah,
Yeah.
if David Merzick doesn't have the time or won't do it.
right. And I do believe that holding the property owner or landlord accountable and responsible for the actions of the tenants that they rent to is the way to go. I think conversation first
Yeah.
with the people that live in the residence, as well as the property owner.
Yeah.
And then step 3, holding that property owner accountable for the actions of their tenants.
It works, holding the.
Well, good, and honestly, this particular residence is not that big an issue. I mean, these kids have not been really awful compared to what I know it can be like. The horror stories on Spruce Street are just not good. And people feel like there isn't any accountability. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from, longtime city residents.
Yeah.
So I think it's a conversation with the code enforcement office, but I think your idea of making that recommendation to the council is a good one.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, does the city of Oneonta have any services like Brooklyn or New York City does, where if you have a landlord-tenant issue, you can call like 311, so you can like do a noise complaint or a service issue, and it goes right to the landlord instead of, or public safety, instead of waiting till something, either negligence or God forbid violence happens, like interceding before it gets to that extent. Is Oneonta have that? I don't know.
I did hear some of the last thing you said.
Does the city of Oneonta have like a form of 311 like downstate where you can contact like an agency that intercedes before you have to wind up in court to try to resolve the matter and help whoever needs
You
help?
mean a landlord-tenant dispute?
Correct.
No.
Oh,
The city
Sort of.
doesn't get involved.
Well, the city does it, but there is an agency in Oneonta that, there's a dispute resolution center in Oneonta.
The landlord-tenant issue is a really tough issue because many landlords will take action against you if you complain to the city.
Yeah.
That's illegal.
Yeah, I know it is, but they do it.
I think that's, we were talking about fair housing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we're doing, is developing a process for people that have complaints about fair housing, on how to work through those issues.
but specific landlord-tenant complaints,
I think,
Dispute Resolution Center.
I think you need some activist students. I don't know if you're a student or not, but
Yeah, I'm a new resident, well, not a new resident, but permanent resident from Brooklyn.
I grew up in Brooklyn, on Parkside Inn.
I grew up in Sunset Park, Gravesend, Sheepside Bay.
We need an activist group of students to start something that I think they did in New Orleans called a Rate My Landlord. Because when you rate landlords and it's public information,
Oh,
they are much more.
That's a great idea.
yeah.
That was a suggestion in one of the housing studies.
Yeah.
I don't remember from how long ago, but it
It's
was a
probably a
suggestion.
suggestion I made a long time
Probably.
ago. It's perfect. But you need to confront, you need to get in touch with the Communist Youth Organization at the colleges. And get them to start that. They would do it.
So can you explain more about what you're looking, or what the situation is that you're looking to?
Kind of, I'm just interested in development. I was actually wondering about Deep Street, I saw that go up, and just concerned about safety, most likely public safety, and that the law is being followed by everybody. That's all.
Welcome to Oneonta.
So I'm here. A year, but I graduated OHS 2008.
Oh,
So you were here and then you left and then came back?
Yes.
oh. I love Oneonta. I don't,
Me too, I do too.
you know, and I raised my daughter here. I
We
just,
all do, that's why we're.
I just want to see it stay,
Flourish
you know.
already. New York
Yeah.
State needs a win.
It feels like it's, just, things have just got, you know,
Yeah.
there's just a student house everywhere you turn.
Mm.
I hate to see that happen to Center City. That's all, because I love living in Center City.
Yes, and the walkability, the whole.
Yeah, I know, I
Yeah,
raised my
it's
daughter in Center City, and I'm
wonderful.
really
Yeah.
glad I did. I
Yeah.
love it, I just don't want to see it become a place where people don't want to live.
Well, I think the character of downtown changed dramatically when Center Street School closed.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
Isn't that the truth? Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah.
the school board was dominated by non-city residents at the time.
Because people would buy,
Yeah,
families
right.
would buy houses downtown so they could have their
Kids
kids
at
walk to
Center Street, because that was the walking, I know, that's where our kids went.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah,
So maybe we need to propose to the school board
that they reopened.
they re-examine opening Center Street School.
Good luck with that.
Well, there is an issue there of, you know, Center Street School would make great apartments,
Yeah.
Yes.
but once it's apartments, it'll never be a school again.
Right.
So, what should we do? I think what we need to do, I think Mark might be right, you know, we need to bring 1,000 families here,
Right.
Yeah.
and 500 with children maybe.
Well, that's just it, and I'd like to see some of them in Center City. I mean,
Right,
that's my
absolutely.
point. I mean, my grandson goes to pre-K at Center Street now, which is really fun.
Yeah. My daughter went to pre-K there, loved it. So,
But it's, I don't want to see all the families going out. You know, I want to see some of them. Center City's great.
Yeah.
it's-
And it's much different now with just the kids not walking to and from school.
Yes, it is.
It's much serious or something, or sad.
Oh, yeah, it's just,
You're making me.
yeah, Center Street is just becoming great, yeah. Just, I know. It is.
No, you raise good points, both of you. And, you know, this is why we're going to have our meeting of the minds, and just appreciate you being here and
Yeah.
raising those concerns. Did we have anything else we wanted to discuss?
Pete's done.
Okay, all right, then I guess I will
My daughter graduated in '06.
move to adjourn the meeting.
When's the king?